So the search for signs of life within the Pac-12 took an unfortunate turn yesterday as reports surfaced that the Colorado Buffaloes look to exit the Pac-12 for the Big 12 by 2024, something we've got to discuss, but that's not all we have to talk about in relation to the Pac-12 today. With this news, we have got to ask and analyze the question, is this the end of the Pac-12? Something we need to dive into. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe the Pac-12 is all but finished at this point? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And we are right around the corner from 20,000 subscribers. I'd love to have you a part of this unbelievable community. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to hit the like and comment down below. And that's not just relegated to me. Do that for your favorite content creator. It truly does mean a ton in helping them get picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And first and foremost, we have to ask the question, how did we get here? At the point where the Pac-12 at one point thought it would be business as usual, that they would renegotiate their TV media rights deal and keep on chugging, to now, there's been a staunch difference in attitude around the futures of the Pac-12, and we kind of need to briefly analyze this. Because at the point where all these conferences were getting their TV media rights deals done, the Pac-12 felt like they were next. However, one of the first problems that occurred is that the Big 12 got their deal done before the Pac-12 did. And the Pac-12 had already promised the teams in their league that they were in for a substantial payday. And I understand if you hear that the Big 12 got it done first, you might first ask yourself, why does that affect the Pac-12? Well, the Big 12 got their TV media rights deal done at a price lower than what the Pac-12 teams thought they would be getting. But at the point where that media rights deal had already been done, and at the point where the news broke where USC and UCLA was no longer going to be a part of the Pac-12's future, it became difficult for these TV media right companies to give the Pac-12 the money that they were asking for. In fact, it became difficult for the Pac-12 to try and get more money than the Big 12. And thus is when we saw this negotiation kind of spiral, where every other week the Pac-12 was negotiating with someone else, whether it was Apple TV, Amazon Prime, ESPN, Fox, the Oprah Network. It just kind of went on, and still we sit with nothing done. And this gets me to the first theme in the video. Whenever you hit an impasse at life, you have two options. You have action and you have inaction. And I'm not contending to just run into a wall with reckless abandon. That's not my point here. My point is you have an option to either sit on your hands or do nothing when you hit a crossroads, or take calculated action. And we see two very different approaches from two different leagues, the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Both leagues had it known that two of the major brands within their leagues would be leaving. For the Pac-12, it's USC and UCLA. For the Big 12, it's Texas and OU. But you saw two different approaches as to what happens after those brands leave. The Big 12 knew it was bad when Texas and OU left because they were such a substantial part of the Big 12 branding. But they didn't sit on their hands. They didn't sit and wait for something to come to them. They took action. They charged forward, got four teams that don't make up for the loss of Texas and Oklahoma. I grant you that, but they're intriguing. UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston in the Big 12, that excites me as a college football fan. It's got me really excited to see what all of those markets will do now at the Power 5 level, especially a UCF. We haven't seen anything from the Pac-12, and in fact, now reports are surfacing that teams are looking to make exits from the Pac-12 because they still have no media rights deal done. There's still uncertainty, and even not speaking about the money, we don't even know if the league will exist in its current capacity in 4 or 5 years because of everything I've just stated. Whenever we look at the Big 12, at the very least, there's financial certainty there. And for these institutions, that's a big deal, because that's one thing that the Pac-12 is not guaranteeing any of them right now, is financial certainty, and that is a problem. You cannot hit an impasse at life and sit on your hands waiting for something to come to you. And that looks exactly like what's happened with the Pac-12. So what happens now? Well, reports last night surfaced that Colorado looks to exit the Pac-12 for the Big 12. And the Big 12 commissioner had some really intriguing talking points about this, stating that he loves what Colorado has done over the past years, what they've done to their brand, getting in Coach Prime, how he moves the needle. And that's something we've talked about on the channel a lot, that though Coach Prime hasn't coached a game there, name me the last time Colorado was in the national headlines this much. Name me the last time recruits were flocking to the Colorado Buffaloes, even if they're not committing. Name me the last time Colorado had this much hype, this much attention, and were able to mobilize this much hype and attention into getting recruits on campus. Because as we sit and speak right now, 5-star defensive back Charles Lester is visiting the Buffaloes, which means something. So that's a brand that has been about action, not inaction, and you're going to start noticing a theme. Colorado's a team we have got to watch going forward, but it looks like a done deal that they look to get out of the Pac-12 into the Big 12, and I think it's a phenomenal move. So the question has to be asked in both parts. What comes next for the Pac-12? What comes next for the Big 12? Well, let's start with the Big 12, because if you're the Big 12, I see no reason to stop with Colorado. Something we talked about briefly last night on the SEC Connect. If you don't tune in, please do. Me, Nick with Nino's Corner, Chris Griffin of the Horns Down Podcast, Jay of Unfair Sports, and of course, Steven of Fanatics Perspective get together every Wednesday night to discuss all the newest topics around college football and especially the SEC, and we'd love to have you there. It's a great time. But last night we discussed this. What comes next for the Big 12? Well, I see no reason for them to stop at Colorado, especially when this gives them 13 teams. I think they'd like that even number. And the question now becomes, what team are they going to go after? Will they add in one more team, keep it at 14, or will they look to do some major expansions? And if the answer is yes, they'd like to do some major expansions, there's another question that comes up. Which brands are you looking at? Personally, I think the first brand that I would be attacking if I was the Big 12 outside of Colorado is Utah. The Big 12 lost one of college football's biggest rivalries in Texas versus Oklahoma. That is a major check that's not going to be clearing for the Big 12 anymore. In my opinion, the best thing to do is try and replace a rivalry with a rivalry. You already have BYU in the league. Go out and get Utah, add them in, and now you can replace that rivalry. Now, will it be as big as the Texas OU rivalry? No. That's one of the biggest rivalries in American sports. But point being, you have something that means more than just a game. You have something that just means more, and you can market it as such. But outside of Utah, I'm looking at those Arizona schools. The Arizona schools were a big deal to the Pac-12 when they entered, and it could be a massive deal for the Pac-12 if they exit. So keep your eye on the Arizona schools, an area we know the Big 12 would absolutely attack. Arizona already has to recruit the state of Texas. The Big 12 would like any footprint they can get and maintain on the West Coast. Arizona would give them that footprint on the West Coast, and it would continue the westward expansion from the Big 12, something we've got to watch. But the major question I think a lot of people have is what happens to Oregon and Washington? And this is a question I have as well, especially when news comes out that the Oregon people are meeting today trying to figure out what comes next. And a lot of people are saying we don't know what that meeting from Oregon is about, and that's 100% true. We have no idea what the Oregon board is meeting about today, but the timing of it is suggestive, and I think we can all agree with that. But I have serious doubts that Oregon and Washington are going to sit on their hands waiting to see what the Pac-12 does. In fact, I think that the only reason they've done it this far is because they were sold a bag of goods. They were sold from the Pac-12 leadership that everything would be taken care of, and that's not at all the case. And the money they thought they were get is decreasing every day because the Pac-12's negotiating power is lessening every single day. They don't have a deal, and now I want all of you to put yourselves in the shoes of a TV media rights deal and think you're walking to a table. Picture yourself walking down a hall to the negotiating table, and I want you to think of all the cards you hold. If the Pac-12, if you're negotiating against the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 has no way to get a deal, teams are looking to leave, you're not going to be inclined to hand them what they're asking for. You're going to be trying to get them at the cheapest price possible. And why? Well, you can look them dead in the face and say, well, you have nowhere else to go. Teams in your league are trying to get out because of the uncertainty. Let us answer some of that. Let us quell some of that uncertainty. You might not like the price, but we can stop the bleeding. They don't hold any cards, does the Pac-12 right now, and that's something that I find really interesting and very concerning. So we're gonna have to sit and watch and see what happens from here. But I've said it before, and I would love to be wrong about this. I would love nothing more than to make a video in the future saying, hey, I have to eat crow. I think we're watching the beginning of the end of the Pac-12, and I can't wait to hear from all of you. Hop down to the comments and let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.